Hello and welcome to the Data Dimensions webinar series, brought to you by the Master of Science in Data Analytics and Policy program and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features a recent graduate, Jess Spayd, on her early career experience. My name is Natalie Cross and I'm the event producer. Please note today's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the Data Dimensions playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function and we will answer as many questions as possible during the latter portion of the event. With that, I will turn over the presentation to our moderator, Dr. Collin Paschall, Program Director for the Master of Science in Data Analytics and Policy program.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie, and thank you to all those who are joining us this afternoon or at this noon time. Again, my name is Collin Paschall. I'm the Program Director for the Data Analytics and Policy program here at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Chris Krompart, who is the Assistant Director of the Data Analytics and Policy program. And we are very happy to be welcoming Jess Spayd to our Data Dimensions series. Jess is a recent graduate of our program, and she is a data scientist dedicated to leveraging technology for the public good. She is currently a U.S. Digital Corps Fellow serving at the Health Resources and Services Administration Bureau of Primary Health Care, where she contributes to enterprise-level data modernization efforts. Before entering the federal service, Jess applied her technical and analytical expertise to a nonprofit organization, an electoral campaign, and a national research laboratory. A career changer, Jess learned to code in 2020 during the Great Resignation and later earned a master's in data analytics and policy from Johns Hopkins University. So a very common profile for our students who are looking to change careers and upgrade their technical skills to take on the jobs of today, both in federal service, but also in other government and public policy related fields. Previously, Jess worked as a professional counselor, bringing over a decade of experience in the education and healthcare sectors. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Jess so she can talk about her work with the U.S. Digital Corps. Thank you for joining us, Jess.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen here. Visual aids. Okay. All right. So thank you for the introduction. You said a lot of the things that I'm going to say, but I'm going to talk about maybe a little bit more. But my name is Jess. I use she and they pronouns. Currently, I'm a data scientist with the U.S. Digital Corps, and I'm a recent grad. So I'm going to just start out, tell you a little bit about what the U.S. Digital Corps is, just to kind of define it, because I'm going to reference it a lot. It's a 2-year fellowship for early career technologists. U.S. Digital Corps fellows are federal employees at the General Services Administration, and we support agencies across the government. And the hope is that U.S. Digital Corps fellows will become permanent technologists in the federal government where they are placed. So, oops, here we go. I would just want to start off with a disclaimer. The views expressed in this presentation belong solely to me and do not reflect the views of the U.S. Digital Corps, the General Services Administration, or the federal government. So I'm representing myself in a personal capacity. So as Collin mentioned, I am a career changer, and I think that if you've seen this graphic before, this really sums up what I feel like my career path has been and sort of what I expect it to be. I'm always open to things kind of changing, you know, that's already an experience I've had, and I've decided to kind of keep my expectations there. So I'll tell you a little bit about where I came from. So I worked in education and healthcare for quite a while, all throughout college and graduate school. I got my bachelor's in psychology and my master's in counseling from the College of New Jersey. And my first professional role, I was a college counselor. I also was a therapist in a couple of private practices during that time. And then my last role in counseling was as a school counselor, which I started in around 2018. And then COVID happened. And like a lot of people in 2020, I started to kind of rethink my career and sort of what I wanted to get out of my career and my life. There's a picture of a couple of us at a socially distanced graduation in 2020. Around this time, I started thinking about my career change. I was really, my main motivation was that I was interested in public policy. I wanted to continue to work in healthcare or social services and education, but to be able to have maybe a broader impact on that. And coming from a counseling background, doing college and career counseling especially, one of the exercises that is really kind of helpful to figuring out what you want to do is to think about, excuse me, about the types of work that you already enjoy, right? So what are the kinds of day-to-day things that you like? Examples, I had interacted with a database when I was a college advisor. I was always doing kind of basic analysis in Microsoft Excel. At the time, I was not calling this, I wasn't using the words database or analysis. I didn't view myself as a data user, but I was kind of sharing these kind of day-to-day things with my partner, who happened to be a software engineer. And he was like, hey, that kind of sounds like data science. That's kind of an adjacent field to him. He was like, this is hot right now. A lot of people are, looking into this. There's a lot of jobs. And so I decided to kind of take a stab at learning how to code on my own, and then taking a class. I really liked it. And I decided that I wanted to start applying to undergraduate and graduate programs actually in data science. And I ideally wanted a program that focused both on the technical skills, but also on either policy or social science. And the Johns Hopkins Data Analytics and Policy program was kind of a perfect fit for what I was looking for. And so I was very happily accepted and started that program in the fall of 2021. And I was in the statistical analysis concentration. And so there's me at the Baltimore campus, which is where I currently live, in the Baltimore area. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of while I was in graduate school, the other experiences that I had in data analytics. So it was very important to me to get work experience while I was in graduate school, especially as a career changer. I really wanted to kind of get a feel and be able to kind of have some stuff on my resume, maybe create a portfolio. One of the things that I did actually in the first few months that I was at Johns Hopkins was I virtually attended the Grace Hopper celebration. If you haven't heard of this, it's a conference really focused on women and non-binary folks in technology. And they also do a lot of recruitment at these events. And actually, I was there, I was attending sessions, I was doing informal interviews for internships. And I happened to learn about a program called the US Digital Corps. And they were actually recruiting their inaugural cohort at the time. And I kind of put that in my back pocket. I was like, this sounds really interesting. I want to learn more about this. So like I said, I interviewed for some internships. I ended up accepting an internship for that summer after my first year of grad school with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. That was virtual. I did not move to Washington State for the summer, but that was a really great experience. It was my first job experience in tech at all. And I worked on a research data project there, as well as I did a cloud computing project towards the end of my internship. And then around the same time, I heard about a fellowship called Bluebonnet. And I was able to get a fellowship with them, working with a campaign, and I provided some technical support, created some data products for them to use, specifically for their kind of like fundraising at the time. And that was a great experience as well to build up my portfolio and my resume. And then this actually, I'm going out of chronological order here, but in my first year at Johns Hopkins, I learned about a hackathon or datathon. I don't remember what they called it at the time, but we were able to work with some of the Baltimore voter file data and to create some visualizations, maps for, I believe it was the League of Women Voters. And that was a really awesome experience. And it also gave me the opportunity to connect with some local people who were doing some of the, kind of like voter education type of work. And they needed some data support at Baltimore Votes. And I was able to get a contract position with them, doing some administrative work, collecting data, doing research, conducting analytics, creating dashboards for them, things like that. And so kind of all these together was sort of my pre-professional experience in data analytics while I was just getting started as a student. So now I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about the US Digital Corps, how I got interested in that, how I applied, and kind of where I'm at currently. I just want to start by saying that I am only speaking about my experience, and the application and selection process can change from year to year for the US Digital Corps, especially because it is really, really new. So I am going to share my experience, but if you're interested in the US Digital Corps, the best thing to do to learn about the process is to attend information sessions and reach out directly to the US Digital Corps. They have an email address. I'll share it at the end of my slides. With that being said, I'll kind of just share what happened for me. So like I said, I learned about the US Digital Corps at the Grace Hopper celebration in 2021. And so later that fall, I attended an information session, and I found out that I would be eligible the following year to apply because they were looking for recent graduates, and I was a current student. So I joined the US Digital Corps mailing list, which you can get on their website. That's another link that I'll share. And so I was able to receive updates throughout the year. Kind of, they were talking about their current cohort starting, and then ultimately when they started recruiting for their second cohort. And so I started attending the information sessions again the following fall. The information sessions gave a lot of information about the program, as well as the application process. So they had an information session prior to, probably a lot of them actually, before the application opened. And then once it did, kind of as each step of the process was happening, they had additional information sessions for applicants to kind of give us guidelines for what we need to do, how we can kind of put our best foot forward in the application. So the first step was to complete an application on USA Jobs. If you've ever applied for federal jobs, you probably did it from there. We had to submit a resume, and the resume, if you've done a federal resume before, it's a little bit different from that. And it was very different from resumes that I had done in the past. Being a college and career counselor, I've been helping people write resumes for a long time, and this was totally new. But they did share a lot of resources, as well as in the information session, give us sort of guidelines of what they were looking for and expecting for the resume, to make sure that you kind of submit it in a way that is going to give you the best opportunity to make it to the next step in the process. I think they even actively have a resume sort of guidelines page on their website to give applicants kind of an idea of what they're looking for. So after I submitted the resume, I also had to complete a take-home assessment. And this, I suspect it's probably changed year after year, but we were provided with a data set and given some prompts to answer questions about the data, demonstrate, how we do data cleaning, what kinds of analysis we want to do, what different statistical tests we're using, and providing some reasoning for that. Also creating a couple of visualizations. And I think that this was a narrative assessment, so they were probably also looking for maybe like how well we can kind of communicate technical information. So then probably a few weeks after that, I learned that I had passed the resume phase, and I had also passed the assessment. And so then the next step was to have the phone interview. I believe that they had yet another information session to prepare us for that. The phone interview was what I would call a technical interview, and it was with a government data scientist, someone that was not necessarily affiliated with the US Digital Corps. And that was really structured. They didn't give us a lot of feedback at that point, but they did kind of use prompts to help you like kind of answer the question as fully as possible and make sure that you're kind of demonstrating what they're looking for. This was someone outside of USDC, like I said, so there wasn't an opportunity to ask questions at that point. But as I've stated, like they were really responsive in the information sessions as well as being available by email. And so finally, I learned that I passed the phone interview and would be considered for agency matching, which is basically the last step in the application process. So basically, they've determined you're eligible. We think that you would be a good fellow, but an agency needs to say, hey, we want that person to work with our team. So I got to fill out a form with some of my preferences for what I would want out of an agency placement. So one of the things that they ask about is your location. So there's fellows from all over the country currently. So depending on your location, whether you would be interested in relocating to the DC area, working remote, hybrid, or in person. And another thing that they asked about in the kind of placement preferences form was about your interests and the impact areas that you want to work on. So I know something that I was really interested in was social services, healthcare, equity, things like that. And they have on their website, they have a lot of the current impact areas that fellows are working on to kind of get an idea of what that would be. Then I received 2 agency matches. And I interviewed with both teams. Basically, these were, teams that seemed to have a match with kind of my skill set and my interests. So interviewed with both, and I was selected for one of them, which I was very lucky was my top choice. It was, the one that I was really interested in the most. And I accepted that offer shortly after I graduated from the DAP program at Johns Hopkins. So I want to say it was May or June that happened. So just to give you some perspective, I applied in the fall, maybe late fall, and was kind of in the like actual offer stage in the summer. So early summer. So it was a long process. It definitely takes some persistence and patience. And I think that I was really invested in it because I was ecstatic when I got this job offer. I was really excited. I had really spent pretty much the entire time that I was in grad school hoping and working towards getting this fellowship. And so it felt like a really big accomplishment. And it was really a good fit for the reason why I had decided to make the career change to begin with. And I was really excited. So then in, I think, mid-July, I actually started orientation with all of the other fellows in my cohort. And we had a virtual orientation to begin with. We did some kind of fellowship 101 where they talked to us about what kinds of things we'd be doing with the fellowship, what kinds of support we had, what the requirements were. We also had a lot of like kind of government 101 sessions. So kind of learning about what it means to be a federal employee, how the government works. And we really had a lot of extensive preparation to begin working with our agency placements. The other really fun thing about orientation was that we had a lot of opportunities to connect with our fellow cohort. So I had a lot of coffee chats with other fellows, as well as fellows that were in the first cohort that were now in their second year in the fellowship. And that was a really great opportunity just to meet so many brilliant people, really passionate people. It was really great company to be in. And then a few weeks later, we all met in DC. So a lot of people flew in from all over the country to complete the orientation and meet everyone in person. And we also got to meet the first cohort there as well. And then the following week, I started working with my placement agency. So I do want to tell you a little bit about, in this picture we got to go to the EEOB, the Eisenhower Executive Office building in DC, which is adjacent to the White House. You could see the West Wing from where we were, which was pretty cool. That's what that picture is. And this is a picture of the first and second cohort all together. So It's a big group, but a small group, depending on how you look at it. And then I started at my working with my placement agency. So now I'm going to kind of get into more of the, the actual kind of work that I've been doing as a fellow. So I support data modernization efforts at HRSA, which is the Health Resources and Services Administration. It's an agency under the Department of Health and Human Services. And the bureau that I support is a bureau that manages grants to community health centers that meet certain requirements, and they're known as federally qualified health centers, or FQHCs. And so these are community health centers all over the country, as well as US territories, that really provide excellent care to their communities and will provide services regardless of a person's ability to pay. So this is a photo of some of the people that I work with. It's a great team. We have statisticians and data scientists, as well as public health analysts. Those are some of the titles that that other folks on the team have. And a lot of people have a background in public health. So, they have these technical skills to work with data, and they also are really passionate about public health. So some of the work that we've been doing, our team created a cloud-based data lakehouse, which was very innovative for the agency. And for the first time ever this year, we ingested de-identified patient-level data from health centers. So we did a pilot with a small cohort of health centers and their electronic health record vendors, or EHR vendors. And I had a couple of roles in those projects. So a big one at the beginning was data validation. So basically being able to do some analysis on the data that was submitted to make sure that it's in the format that we were expecting, that it was truly de-identified, and that it was going to be in a usable format that we could use. And kind of the next piece of it was just reporting findings, summaries of the submissions to our leadership at HRSA. And then one of the things that I was primarily in charge of was actually creating and sharing reports with health centers and their vendors to give them kind of an idea of how this data can be used in the future. They put in a lot of hard work to enable this to happen, and we wanted to kind of provide some information to them and show them the benefit of all the work that they've been doing. And then in addition to that, my colleague Bailey and I, pictured on the right-hand side here, we also worked on a research project together. So there's something called challenge.gov. If you haven't heard of it, it's really government challenges that are open to the public typically, where you can kind of contribute your ideas to all kinds of things across the government to help, to support the public. And so the Department of Justice had a 2024 data challenge, and Bailey and I were actually the winners of that challenge. So that was really exciting. And in our project, we used our health center data and that was only the public data sets were allowed to be used in this. But we used the health center data to explore the efficacy of using the DEA's data on confiscated substances in order to measure the community impact of the opioid crisis. So again, coming from my background in mental health, this was really, really interesting to me, and it was an opportunity to kind of see how these public government data sets can be used to really make a difference for the public. So that's kind of my introduction on where I've been and what I'm doing. And so I'd be happy to take some questions now, and I'll just put up this last slide here just so that I don't forget. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email if you have questions. If you have questions more specifically about the US Digital Corps, I would prefer that you reach out to them. Check out their website. They have a lot of helpful information there. You can sign up for their newsletter there. And also this email address is the one that they provide if you have specific questions, and their applications for the next cohort open in January.
Well, thank you so much, Jess, for sharing your experience, both in terms of your professional trajectory before and during Johns Hopkins, and also a little bit about your experience starting with the USDC. I certainly welcome anybody who's in attendance who has any questions for Jess, that if they want to drop those in a QA or in the chat. We'll try to certainly get to those. But I have a few things that I can also chime in and ask just from my own curiosity as well. And I guess the first thing I'm curious about, Jess, is in terms of like the skills, the technical skills that you developed that you're using in your job today. Like which of those are sort of things that you definitely learned like in the data analytics and policy program? What were some things that you kind of learned independently, and what were some of the sort of the on-the-job training that you've used that has enabled you to do your job now as part of USDC? Sort of what are the basic sort of technical stack that you draw on?
Yeah, good question. So I will say, just generally speaking, that I feel like the data analytics and policy program prepared me pretty well for the US Digital Corps. And in addition to that, I have learned a lot on the job. So yeah, the technical skills that I'm using the most, I think, like, you know, I have more than once kind of referenced my notes from like kind of the core courses, like quantitative methods and things like that. You know, I am a R programmer through and through, and I think that, you know, that preparation at Hopkins was really, really helpful. And actually, a lot of my colleagues also use R. So, you know, one of the things that I do the most, which I think is maybe underappreciated a little bit, is doing descriptive and summary statistics are sometimes the most useful, you know, kinds of things that you can do. So being able to, you know, clean your data and be able to kind of give a summary of here is what we have has been really important. And that was all stuff that I was, you know, very well versed in from the program. Some of the things that I had to more learn on the job or kind of draw on other experiences, really working with databases. I had taken the database management class, and that was really, really useful. And something that I hadn't really done at all in a practical setting was code in SQL and, like, you know, get data from a database. And so that is something that I have learned a lot on the job. I feel like a SQL expert now, or SQL. Another one that, at least at the time that I was at Johns Hopkins, it wasn't addressed a lot in courses, although I remember that we had a workshop about Git and version control. That has been extremely important and useful, especially working with a team. You know, on my team, we use Git, and there's a couple of different platforms depending on what, you know, kind of agencies you're working with. Another one that I just think is important to become familiar with if you aren't is cloud basics, because that really is where the tech is moving towards. And I knew a little bit about that from my internship at the Pacific Northwest. So that's sort of like the technical skills. If I could kind of broaden that to other skills, I think that technical communication for a lay audience is one of the most important things that I do on a daily basis. And that has been a learning process, although I think that, you know, we're prepared pretty well for that in the DAP program as well. But something that I do on a very regular basis is sort of, you know, being able to explain to especially leadership or other folks in the team who aren't technical, like, here is what I did, here's why it makes sense. Being able to give different options for, like, here is one solution we could do, here's another, and what the pros and cons are, what the level of effort is. That is kind of like my, like, bread and butter now. That's something that I'm doing a lot. Kind of being able to think ahead and say, like, before I dive into creating a solution, what are the different options? What are the potential obstacles? I have one more thing, is just sort of like working within the bureaucracy, you know, hacking bureaucracy, as some people call it, I think is a really important skill that you will learn on the job. The US Digital Corps provides a lot of support in being able to do that, but just understanding how decisions are made in government, you know, because there's a lot of considerations to make with how it's going to impact, you know, policy and impact the public. And so being able to understand how you can kind of leverage your expertise, leverage the relationships, is a very important soft skill to have. So.
Great, thank you so much. I'm particularly gratified to be able to tell you that Git workshop is now incorporated into our programming and data management class. So we do have some Git coverage, and we also have a class which is just about cloud computing now. So I'm glad to know, good to know that we are you know, headed in the right direction on those fronts. Chris, if you have any questions, you feel free, or we can also send it to the audience.
I do have some questions, but I'll go ahead and defer to some of the questions that we have in the Q&A. So I'll make sure to ask mine though towards the end, just in case someone else asks it along the way. But I can go ahead and read the first question from the Q&A. This is from James, and James asks, on your EHR project, did the data come anonymized, or was that part of the cleaning process for your team?
So great question. It came to us anonymized. We are not willing to have any identifiable information in our data lakehouse. So there is a process without getting too much into the kind of the technicals of it. Basically, it before it comes to us, it gets anonymized by the vendors, and then we get it fully anonymized.
Okay, I can ask the second question then. And so this is from Ashley. She was interested in the initial conference at Johns Hopkins that you talked about. I believe it was the Grace Hopper one. I was wondering if you could just tell like how you learned about that, what you learned from it, and if people wanted to learn more information, what they might do.
Sure. Yeah. So the Grace Hopper celebration is run by, I think it's an international organization called Anita B. Or AnitaB.org, which is named after Anita Borg, who is a significant figure. I don't know a lot about her at the moment, but certainly in computer science. Thank you. Yeah, that's the link. I mean, how I learned about it, like I said, my partner is a software engineer, and so he has a strong network of folks in computer science, and it's a very popular conference for folks in engineering, I would say, mostly. They're really, because it has those opportunities for networking and recruitment, he kind of encouraged me to check it out. And it was a great experience. They really are doing a lot of work to, you know, bring some more women and non-binary folks and minorities in the tech space. So I will just give the caveat that I think it's not as much data science specific. It's much more, in my experience, has been much more catered to software engineers, but it is for all technologists.
If I could follow up.
Go ahead, Carl.
If I could follow up on that question, actually, Jess, like, I wonder if you could share like what other kinds of professional development, you know, experiences you've kind of pursued in the last several years, in terms of conferences you're attending, or, you know, Reddit threads you follow, or blogs. Are blogs still a thing? I don't know, maybe that's dating myself, but what are some of the ways that you kind of try to keep abreast of the, you know, the trends in your field that you need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, this is one thing that I meant to say about the US Digital Corps. Just something to note is that they are really focused on learning and development, and they really value that. And so we have dedicated time each week to be able to do professional development and take time to learn things. So I've been to quite a few conferences over the past year or so. We were talking about them earlier before the webinar started, but actually everyone in the data science track in the fellowship attended the data science conference, that's what it's called, in Chicago this past year. And that was a really interesting conference. They don't have any vendors or recruiters or sponsors. So it's really about people sharing their work experiences instead of kind of what you get at a lot of other conferences where people are trying to, you know, sell their products or they're trying to recruit folks. or people are there to try to get a job. So it was sort of a different vibe from that. I really liked that one. I'm an R programmer, as I said. I've attended the Shiny conference, Posit conference. Those are really good opportunities. I did those virtually, and they're pretty affordable in that way. One of my favorites that I've been to actually, which might interest folks, especially if you're local to the DC area, is, I want to say it correctly. I think it's called the Public Sector R Conference, sometimes referred to as the GovR Conference. And that was just held in October, I believe, in Washington, DC. And that is a great conference where primarily folks in the public sector, thank you for sharing the link, come together and share, the work that they're doing in and out of the government. Really liked that one. And yeah, I feel like maybe that doesn't fully answer your question. I have to say that working in the government, there's a lot of really great communities of practice in the technical space. Especially the U.S. Digital Corps is housed under the Technology Transformation Services at GSA, and they actually run a lot of these communities of practice. And there's also communities of practice within different agencies and cross-agency. And that is primarily where I'm getting a lot of resources and learning about kind of trends and things like that, which is awesome. So I will say we have an artificial intelligence community of practice, which has been extremely popular. They don't even have enough space for it. And they've been doing trainings every year. So there's actually a lot of opportunities even within the government to kind of get new skills and stay on top of what's happening. So.
I'm happy to ask a couple more questions because I'm just curious. One thing that came to mind. Oh, Katie came through. Okay, thank you, Katie. Katie asks, does the program help make career connections within the government once the fellowship concludes? Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of the career pipeline for your permanent role down the road.
Yeah. So great question. So I'll start by saying that the goal of the fellowship is that at the conclusion of the 2 years, ideally, if you have met all of the kind of performance expectations and you and the agency feel like it's a good fit, there's a process where you can transition to become a permanent employee at that agency that you've been supporting throughout the fellowship. So that is the kind of expected pipeline for the U.S. Digital Corps. Beyond that, I will say that, you meet a lot of really interesting people, especially because you're sort of a cross-agency individual in the fellowship. So you are getting to know all of these folks in the technology transformation services at GSA, who, a lot of people are, technical expertise. We work with some folks in the Presidential Innovation Fellows, which is in the same kind of area, except those are more mid and senior level folks. There's a lot of connections with the U.S. Digital Service, which is, again, for more senior folks in technology in the government. And so you do meet a lot of really interesting people. And you also are working at an agency, and you're working with all of these fellows who are at all these different agencies. So there's just tons of opportunities for networking and making connections, to, potentially, look for opportunities down the road within the government. So it's, specifically in the U.S. Digital Corps, you have a huge network.
I want to ask a question about sort of subject matter expertise. You said that one of the things you do is you spend a lot of time sort of communicating to non-technical audiences. And I think that's something that I struggle with a little bit, and I bet a lot of students in the program struggle with, is that I can barely imagine somebody not having some technical foundation, to understand what you're talking about when you're talking about databases or data analysis, data cleaning, visualization, whatever these different steps are. What do you think that some of your external audience, what are some of the mistakes they make, or the things you kind of have to keep clarifying for them that you feel like are just not well understood by folks that don't have like a strong sort of data science, data analytics foundation, if that's not too broad of a question.
Yeah, let me think about that. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that non-technical folks will have a tendency to maybe ask for something without having a full understanding of whether or not it's feasible, and also about how much time it will take and how much effort it will take. And so when I was sort of saying, when I provide options, that's really what I'm focusing on. And I think that has sort of guided my ability to kind of do that technical communication to a lay audience, is saying, you know, very practically, here's the different options, the different things that we could do, and here's how hard it's going to be and how many resources it's going to take and how much time it's going to take. And I that is really the key thing for me. I think, it's kind of our job as technologists, as data scientists, to be able to sort of respond to a business need and say, here's what I can provide. So I always kind of approach it that way. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else, but that was the first thing that came to mind.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that, my understanding, it's kind of the same thing with a research project in academia, right? Like half of the problem is defining the variables you're trying to study, how you're going to measure them, how much data cleaning is required. The mechanics of this are often much more complex than just the 10 lines of R code you need to estimate your regression model or do whatever you're trying to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's all the other resource mobilization. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Sometimes the hardest challenge is like, do we have the data to answer this question? And yeah, sometimes it takes work to just even find the answer to that. So.
Well, that's why we try in our courses, as you know, we try to make people go find the data, you know what I mean, to realize whether or not this project is even possible. Like that's the whole point. So Ashley has another question in the chat here about any other fellowships you applied to. It sounds like you were kind of locked into this fellowship or this fairly early on, but I assume in the meantime, you're probably doing some kind of other low-level, career search. So what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was really locked into this opportunity. So I was applying to industry jobs. I was applying to government jobs, state, local, and federal. While I was doing this job search, I was looking at nonprofits, kind of trying to really put my feelers out for anything. And I will say that I did get a couple of offers, and the U.S. Digital Core offer came just at the right time where I was about to uproot my life for another opportunity. So yeah, I have to say I don't know of other kind of similar fellowships for early career technologists that I could kind of point folks to. USDC was really the one for me. I was very excited about it.
I think there might be some. I don't know. I don't know this for sure. I think there are some sort of like think tanks that will have like sort of early career fellowships. I think there's something called the Lincoln Foundation, I think does something along these lines. And there may be some things for state government. So I know that if you do a little searching, there are some other fellowship opportunities out there, but not necessarily associated with the federal government. Katie asks a question about outside of the core classes. Were there any electives in the data analytics and policy program that you remember that you found to be particularly helpful? I know we're kind of going back a couple of years now, but if you do have any courses that come to mind, I'd be happy to hear them.
Yeah. I feel like this might be recency bias because it was definitely my last semester, but I really liked the text as data course. That was one of my favorite courses. That's the one that comes to mind. That was something that I included in my portfolio, was the project I did in that class. So other ones that come to mind, really, the capstone, I think maybe data science, really any course where I was able to produce like a project that I could include in a portfolio were the ones that stuck out to me. And I mentioned it before, the database management and the big data management courses I thought were really, really useful. I think those were electives. those I think turned out to be even more valuable than I expected.
Chris, do you have anything that comes to mind you wanted to ask?
Yeah, so I'm glad I held off on a couple of the questions because some of them came up. I think it's really interesting how you mentioned like communities of practice, especially around like AI, on how you like learn new things. But I'm gonna swerve a little bit. And so I think, maybe not surprising to the people who are attending this talk or maybe listening to it later on YouTube that the federal government has data scientists. It's not surprising to us, but I think it would probably be surprising to, maybe the typical person. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how, being a data scientist with the federal government, not that you necessarily have personal experience in the private sector, but you might work with data scientists in the private sector. And just if you could kind of talk about how they differ, how they're similar to each other, if you have had interactions with data scientists from the private sector, kind of what they're like. Just to talk a little bit about it, because I think like what you've described here is just sort of like your professional story, but it's probably something that people, might not necessarily have been familiar with. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm gonna be careful not to speculate because I really don't have like the personal experience, but to kind of talk about what my experience as a data scientist has been in the government is that data science is still like a relatively kind of like new idea of it being something distinct from other kind of parts of the data life cycle and like computer science, software engineering kind of side of things. Something that I have noticed is that sometimes when I talk to folks, their title is not data scientist, but that's exactly what they're doing, data science. And so titles, they don't necessarily mean a lot, but I think it kind of speaks to the idea that data science is newish, and it's particularly new in the government for sure. And I think that's part of what the U.S. Digital Corps is kind of working to change is just along with some of these other programs like U.S. Digital Service, to bring technologists into that space, and specifically data science. People are talking about AI all the time. And I will say that I'm seeing that outside of work. I'm seeing that, in other professional spaces, and I'm also seeing it in the government. That it's something that people are really interested in, and they're really looking to data scientists and saying, well, what are we going to do? We need to how can we use this? How can we leverage this? Like, is this good? Is this bad? I think something that is kind of different in the government, and again, this is sort of me speculating. I'm not working in industry, but I think that, you have to have expectation that the government is going to move a little bit slower than the industry when it comes to, digital transformation, especially with things like AI. The government has different priorities, different values, compared to the private industry. And those priorities need to be balanced with the kind of need for innovation. And I think that is really relevant to data science and AI in particular. And it's because the scale of impact is so big, right? So when the government changes the way that they're doing something and they implement this new technology, it's going to have this huge far-reaching impact. It's going to impact everyone. It's going to impact the whole country. Maybe I'm using hyperbole a little bit because not every service is being used by every person, but it's going to affect a lot of people. And so you just have to make a lot of considerations and really take time and care. And I think, that is a difference. I view it as a good difference. I think it comforts me that the government is not like, let's use chatbots for everything. So yeah, I think that I hope that helped answer your question.
No, I like I said, I think like it was a very broad question that I asked you, so I appreciate how you narrowed it down a little bit. I like though how you've been talking about, you talked about values just a moment ago. Earlier you said soft skills. And so I was wondering, like, is there anything that like really comes to mind in terms of like, in addition to being teched up, that if someone wants to go into this line of work, like sort of if you have these values, you might find that this is a worthwhile opportunity. I was wondering if you could just like expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that speaks to why I am in the US Digital Corps and why I was interested in public service. And I think I may have mentioned this when I was kind of talking about the other fellows, is that it was really interesting to be around such like-minded people that really want to serve the public. And I think that is really important if you, you know, kind of value, you know, providing services that the government does, and doing it in a way that is accessible and equitable, that is really, really valuable. I think going back to what I was just saying, you know, if you are wanting to work in an environment where, you know, like things are like moving really fast and we're trying the new technology all the time, like that's not necessarily what you're going to get in the government. You want to have patience and persistence. You definitely want to be, it's important that you be invested in innovation. And, you know, I think especially in US Digital Corps, that is sort of, you know, a big part of what we're kind of, you know, being placed in these agencies, and we're sort of the person that is expected to sort of like push some of the innovation. But you have to have patience and persistence, because it's not going to happen overnight. You got to be in it for the long game. And I think by having kind of the values, the belief that this is important work that we're doing, and that, you know, we're doing this to serve the public, enables you to have the patience and persistence to move innovation forward. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jess, for all of the, you know, for your time, for your insights, for your personal story. I think it's in many ways, I think a model of what we want, you know, our alumni to be achieving in the first few years out, as they, you know, make that career change and get involved in the public sector and work as a data scientist. So I know there are a couple other questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we're just kind of running out of time. So I would ask that anyone who wants to follow up with you, send you an email individually. I know you shared your contact information earlier. Could you put your slide up again just real quick, so anyone in the audience could write that down quickly?
Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, thank you so much again for sharing all your contact information and for all of your time this afternoon. And you know, please stay in touch going forward. I'm going to be excited to see you know, what you achieve in the years to come. So I think that will end our webinar for right now. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Jess, and also you can reach out to me or Chris as well with any follow-ups. So thank you all for attending, and have a good rest of your day.